the What Really Happened radio show. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Tuesday, March 3rd, 2015, and we're getting into the week here. We've got lots of stuff to talk about. Phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Tom is in our control room, ready to answer the phone. We've already got a caller waiting on the line. I'm going to get to you in just a second. Obviously, the big news of the day is that Netanyahu did his speech before a joint session of the Congress, and even as SRN noted, when he walked into the room, he got a round of applause that made it look like the deity had decided to visit. Obama didn't even get that much applause from his own Congress. And it's embarrassing, it's humiliating. I am thoroughly and utterly disgusted with the the Israeli Congress in Washington, D.C., Apparently, somebody was keeping count. There were over 40 standing ovations during Netanyahu's speech. They probably would have done even more, but by then the legs were starting to cramp up. Anyway, all right, let's start grabbing some phone calls here. We're going to go to Matthew in Baltimore. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good afternoon, Mr. Rivero. How are you?
Fine.
I just wanted to call and share your sentiment, and I actually called into one of my local radio stations, and it shocks me into disbelief that when you bring facts to the table with one of these, alleged journalists or talk show hosts, whatever you want to call it, when you bring up the Constitution, you bring up the Logan Act, you bring up any pertinent fact or truth, they immediately, just shut you down. The guy hung up on me. It's such an aggravating thing to see people that are selling out their selves and us for their, as you would say, 30 pieces of silver. It just makes me sick to my stomach.
Well, that's the reason the independent media is out here, is because the corporate media is bought and paid for and protected by the law, and they're getting very, very rich by being convincing liars.
Well, I just want to thank you for what you do, because I've only been awake for about 3 years now, and it's been a tough 3 years, to be quite honest with you.
Yes.
And I don't know how you have done what you've done for so long and still been able to maintain your sanity. Because the last 3 years that I've been awake and really knowing the truth have been really tough. And I want America to come back to what it should be, what America is supposed to stand for, what we were all raised, to believe that America stood for. And I'm hard pressed to find a solution, because I want the future for my children that, was promised to all of us. And this is not going to happen in the system that we're living in. And I just want to thank you for fighting the fight. And I don't know how you stay sane, especially without some kind of prescription, mind-altering drug.
Single malt. That's my secret. Single malt.
Well, Mr. Rivera, thank you. And, stay sane. I don't know how you do it.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who would question whether I'm sane or not, but it has been this incredible 21-year journey, if you will. And I understand what you're going through, where all of a sudden that illusion that you were wrapped in as a small child falls away. And it can literally trigger an identity crisis where you're not even sure who you are anymore, let alone what's going on in the world. But I'm definitely in agreement with you. Our children deserve a better world. Our children deserve the United States we were all taught that we lived in. And I think I
have two sons. And I'm not even, to be quite honest with you, Mr. Rivero, I'm not worried about me anymore. I mean, I'm going on 40. Mm-hmm. I'm worried about what I'm leaving behind for my children, my two boys, and not just mine, not just my children, everyone's children. Like, what am I going to leave behind? Because I think we all need to get to a point at which we take responsibility for what's going on.
Yeah, we definitely have to here, because I've always held that our highest moral duty of all is to leave to the next generation a better world than that which was left to us. Unfortunately, our generation is failing that task, And our children they're going to be made to pay for our failures and our mistakes. And that's a terrible legacy to leave to them. And as far as what we're going to do about it, I know it's very difficult, it's very frustrating, but I think we're going to have to stay calm, not give the government an excuse to declare martial law, and just sit back and wait for the financial system to start tearing itself apart. And we have to oppose war, because that's how the U.S. government tries to distract from these messes or get out of them, because it worked twice before. But what I think everybody needs to be doing right now is calling their member of Congress who was in that speech with Netanyahu and say, you just lost my vote, because it's obvious that you are serving a foreign government. Everybody's got to call in.
A bunch of the Maryland representatives, a few of the Maryland representatives didn't go.
Yes.
Which is all fine and good. But if you look at the rest of their track record, you can't, it's kind of like, praising a pig for not rolling in the mud just one time.
Well, you know what was really very interesting, of course, is
back for it.
Yeah, this really came down to a contest between Obama and Netanyahu, who's running the country. And unfortunately, Congress and most of the corporate media clearly put Israel's interests above the wishes of our chief executive. And I'm not obviously in total agreement with Obama's policies, but he is the president. And the Congress should be listening to him and saying he sets the policy, not this foreign leader, especially because everything Netanyahu said in that speech was just a rehash of the same lies they've been saying for the last 20 years. I was rather appalled. Fox News, during the speech, was running this lower third banner about how, Iran had an underground facility that was discovered in 2009. No, that's not exactly what happened. In 2009, Iran called up the IAEA and said, listen, we're starting to build an underground facility. Please come check it out. And we're building it because we're concerned that Israel might bomb our nuclear infrastructure the way they did Iraq all those years ago. And they tried to spin it that Iran was hiding something, and they weren't. Iran notified the IAEA, as they're supposed to do. Iran's playing by the rules. And they're still regurgitating all of these lies, and just hoping that if they keep repeating them over and over and over again, that we will suddenly somehow come to believe it. But, the days of that big lie, of selling a lie through repetition, they're gone again, because the population is skeptical. They're not trusting of the government and the corporate media. And we're already seeing some very negative reactions to Netanyahu's speech popping up all over the independent media.
I just think it's funny that I don't know however many years ago, the very first time that they said Iran was weeks away from building a nuclear weapon.
That was back in the 1980s.
Okay, well, it's 2015, so how many times or how many weeks have gone by where they haven't met that deadline? I'm pretty sure Iran isn't in the Stone Ages. If they were going to build a nuclear bomb, I'm pretty sure they would have done it by now.
Yeah, they probably would have there, but, this has been Israel's constant propaganda. Iran is going to get a bomb. Iran is going to get a bomb. The only time they stopped it was when they changed the story and said, we know Iraq has nuclear weapons. We know Iraq has centrifuges that are as small as washing machines, and that's why you can't find them. And when we listen to Netanyahu going on and on about Iran, we need to remember that Israel was out there pushing the propaganda that led to the second invasion of Iraq, which has been a disaster for the United States of America and continues to be. And so why are we listening to him still? Why are members of Congress? Well, we know why Congress is listening to him. They're all getting huge stacks of cash from AIPAC. That's probably why one of the reasons there were all the standing ovations. On the seat of the chair behind him, there's a big money bag, and it's uncomfortable to sit on, giving him sciatica or something.
I will not allow the blood of my children to be spent in any war for this country.
Absolutely agree.
Unless there was a real reason, and there is no real reason.
There's never a real reason. There's the public excuse and the private profit. Matthew, we got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We've got more callers waiting. Thank you very much for the phone call, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about Netanyahu's speech here, and we got some callers on the line. I'm going to get to you in just a minute, but I want to make a couple of points. Basically, Netanyahu repeated all the same lies we have been hearing since the 1980s about Iran is on the verge of building a nuclear bomb, and the first thing they're going to do when they get it is to nuke Israel. It's a complete fantasy. First of all, even Israel's Mossad is saying there is no evidence Iran is pursuing a nuclear weapon. And even if Iran had a nuclear weapon, they're not stupid enough to launch it toward Israel, because the result would be Israel, with its now acknowledged nuclear arsenal, and the United States turning Iran into a giant green glass parking lot and sending in the Marines to paint the lines. It's completely bogus. And Netanyahu is out there basically trying to declare that he will decide what the P5+1 deal is going to be. He's not happy with what the P5+1 are talking about, even though Israel is not actually part of the negotiations. And he doesn't really have anything to say there, but he's going to go into Congress and say, this is the deal that Israel will accept. Iran scraps all of its nuclear work, tears down its power station, gets rid of its medical isotope factories and industrial destaticers and everything else they're manufacturing right now, all of which are competing in the export market with Israel's products. And, to top it off, that Iran stopped making long-range rockets, including the ones for, satellites, because they can be modified to launch the evil nuclear weapon toward Israel. And, of course, Iran's not going to go for that. Everything Iran is doing, they are allowed to do under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And basically, Netanyahu has set up a deal that he absolutely knows Iran will not go for, because they just got that power station up and running. They're not going to shut it down and spend all the money to decommission a brand new nuclear power station. But Netanyahu is out there to prove that he will decide for the rest of the world what the P5+1 deal is going to be. All right, let's grab some phone calls here. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. All this is, it's not even about a nuclear weapon. It's about power in the region.
That's exactly right.
And, you got between the banking cartel, and you got those American exceptionalism people like on Fox News, Megyn Kelly and all the Ollie Norts and Sean Hannity. These people believe, God chosen us to be, the world's military and economic superpower, and nobody's going to challenge us. And this is these people are unstable. I mean, liars and unstable group. Netanyahu lied how many times? Just keeps lying.
Well, it's even more dangerous than that, okay? It's a phenomenon called the true believer. And these people have gotten this country into so much trouble over the years. These are people who are absolutely convinced of their ideology. They are oblivious to any counter-arguments, and they're convinced that their belief in this ideology justifies ignoring the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, declaring war, killing innocent people because it serves our noble agenda. And obviously the corporate media is right on board with Israel's agenda. In fact, there's an object lesson here, because when it came down to a choice about supporting the president or supporting Israel, for pretty much the entire U.S. corporate media said, we're going to salute Mr. Netanyahu and promote his agenda. Have you seen how Obama's been under attack over this last week? Doesn't love Tel Aviv, doesn't support Israel. Oh, he's a bad president for not swearing undying fealty to Tel Aviv. And, this true believer mentality, we serve a higher purpose, and therefore we should be exempt from the laws of man and nature and morality. And every time you get these true believers collected together in one spot, sooner or later a disaster happens.
Yeah, you have the Zionists, and you got the true believer, God's chosen ones. And, we're in a dangerous time. These neocons mixed with bad economic news, mixed with bankism, and we got some serious. And if you look at that Gallup poll, 17% view America as an economic superpower, because we're not anymore, people. It has shifted. You can tell. The new economic is Eurasia. That's it.
The only reason the U.S. is still considered an economic superpower is most everybody, and a dwindling number, are being forced to continue using the U.S. dollar for natural resource trade and for any kind of trade and banking across national borders. But that's going away between BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperative Organization. China's got all these direct currency swaps going without going through the U.S. dollar, and that's what these wars are really all about. Now, there's an overlap regarding Iran, because Netanyahu, as you said before, wants to get rid of a regional rival. That's what this is really all about. Israel wants to be the big dog in the Middle East, and they succeeded in tricking the United States into destroying Iraq. Now they want to do it to Iran, and then they're just going to work on down the list. balkanizing and shattering every other regional power there, so that Israel, with its nuclear arsenal, will be in control of all the world's oil in that part of the world, and through that oil will exert control over the rest of the world's economy. That's what's going on here. Now, the U.S. is a willing ally because the United States wants Iran to accept private central banking. They want Iran's oil to be traded only for U.S. dollars. And again, wars are never started for just one reason. But when you get a handful of people who all see that war as serving whatever their own individual agenda is, then the war is going to happen. And that's what's going on with this rush to a new war with Iran. Unfortunately, Iran and Russia are now major trading partners. And any more pressure on Iran is going to push forward that confrontation with Russia, which is not entirely undesired by the United States, which is dealing with the rising ruble as a threat to the U.S. dollar. Very, very much so. Future history books are going to say that in the Third World War, it was the United States and Israel and Great Britain, less the rest of NATO, who were the aggressors, who started this whole mess.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. Iran's no pushover. And then, with Saudi Arabia is just a useful idiot. That country is dead. It's pretty much the oil is shrinking in volume, and it doesn't really have anything else. So that's like a dead, monarchy, right?
Well, they're already trying to blame Saudi Arabia for 9/11, so we know that Saudi Arabia is now on the U.S. government's special high-interest targets list to be invaded and conquered and regime changed at some point.
Yeah, it's good to be a friend with the U.S. or the CIA, huh? Just like that Nemtsov guy. You're a useful idiot, and you get discarded like a piece of garbage.
Oh, absolutely. Well, Lee Harvey Oswald, he was CIA, and they just said, well, we need a patsy and a dead body, and you're it. Surprise, surprise, surprise.
Hey, Mike, one more thing. I couldn't find my wallet. I went to the table, and there was a note there, and it said Putin was here. Thanks, Mike.
All righty. We have to take another break for commercials here, and I forgot to hit the button on that thing. We'll be back with another phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, where the phone lines are loaded up here. And before we take the next phone call, just need to make a point here. Netanyahu is not getting a lot of traction on his speech, at least out here in the real world. Obviously, Congress has been bribed to just think, oh, it's the truth. And it's simply because Netanyahu didn't bring anything new to the speech. It's the same regurgitated lies that Netanyahu's been saying for 20 years and Israel's been saying for 30. And he's been crying, Iran wolf, Iran wolf, Iran wolf, Iran wolf, and we're tired of hearing about it. And, of course, with the revelation that even the Mossad was saying they couldn't find any indication that Iran is building a nuclear weapon. It's just amazing. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Alex in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I was calling because I'd like to vent. I'm pretty, PO'd at the fact that Netanyahu, such a repugnant, malign individual, can come to our country and literally divide the people we picked to lead us, and I just think that just the fact that that's happened is a calamity. But my question
I would disagree. Before you get to your question, I would disagree. I think this is one of the best things that could have happened for America because, up until now, Israel's control of the U.S. government has been hidden from popular view by a complacent media and a complacent Congress. Today it was on full display. Every American who cared to tune in got an object lesson that Washington, D.C. is not a lawful, legal, constitutional government. It is an occupying power, a puppet regime on behalf of Israel. And that they got their noses rubbed in that today, and I think that's a good thing. I think we're going to see a huge outpouring of anger toward everybody who was in that room today.
Do you think that the American people are going to become more aware of the faction war that's going on within our government? And my question is, and I'll take my answer off the air, my question is, with this thing with net neutrality coming up, I've always thought about this. You know how we don't like the fact that we have privacy and private entities managing our central bank? How come we want to have the internet remain private instead of how come our money can go into government centralized hands, nationalized hands, so that we could have some transparency on how it works, but our internet is better if it stays in the rubric of the private entities. And that's my question, Mike, and I'll take my answer off the air. You keep doing a great job, and my best to you and your wife. Be well.
Well, thank you very much here. The issue over net neutrality, if that's all that was involved, maintaining net neutrality, everyone saw that as a good thing. But that was the bait to get people to come on in and say, oh, yes, we've got to have net neutrality. The problem is there is 300 pages of other regulations which are still not public, which means there's something in there they know we are not going to like very much. Right now, the U.S. government understands the American people don't trust them anymore, don't listen to the corporate media, won't buy the propaganda. And they're hoping that if they can silence the independent media through regulatory compliance, that the American people will just forget all about the lies and betrayals that they have learned about over the last several decades and just obediently troop back to their little telescreen in the living room and get their daily beliefs handed to them by the corporate media. It's not going to happen. The damage is already done. You can take a century for a government to earn the trust and faith of its population, and it's destroyed with a single stupid, clumsy lie. Saddam's nuclear weapons, torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, Spanish mine, blah, 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 blah. You've heard all of that. The trust is not going to be coming back anytime soon. People are going to go look for the truth where they can find it. And if the independent media does get shut down, people will go to other sources. Remember, the Soviet Union was brought down with a network of fax machines. All right, we're going to take another phone call here. Eric in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Eric, are you there? Okay, I am not hearing Eric. Eric, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
can you hear me?
There we go. We had a little problem there. What's on your mind?
Yeah, real quick, Netanyahu made me sick to my stomach after hearing his stupid speech. One thing I wanted to bring up to you is right now I just finished listening to the Alex Jones show, and he was talking about how it's just a distraction, the Netanyahu and Iranian conflict, and how the people are making such a big deal about Netanyahu being there. And a caller had called in and talked about how he likes to never talk about Israel and, pretty much threw him into the lions. He got kind of pissed off, and gave a little explanation. And then he hangs up with the caller and goes on with a pro-Israeli guest, talking about how Netanyahu's crying for help because he doesn't trust Obama being, how he has hangs out too much with Muslims and other Muslim countries. And I don't know, it just kind of, upsets me that people can't realize that Israel is the problem in this world, and I don't know. But I thank you, Michael, and thank you very much, and I'll let you go because I know you had a lot of stuff to talk about. Thank you, Michael. All
right, well, thank you very much here, and I'm going to go ahead and repost that video. It's on YouTube. Alex Jones supports Zionist Israel, and it's apparently from very early in Alex Jones' career where he gets on and says, I'm an unquestioning supporter of Israel, and apparently he still is to this very day. When I was with GCN the first time around, Alex would have me on, he would follow me with a pro-Israel guest, and they'd say, oh, he's a nut, he's an anti-Semite. Yes, Alex Jones does have a bias, and you don't need me to be telling you about that. So, anyway, actually, the phone lines are open right now, so I'm going to sneak some news in before we get our next call here. Story coming out of 12160. The former head of the Israel Atomic Energy Commission, Uzi Eilman, told the Yedioth Aharonoth Daily newspaper in an interview that Israel's threats of attacking Iran are empty. He doesn't even think Iran wants a nuclear bomb. And it makes a lot of sense. What would Iran do with it? March it down the streets of Tehran in a parade? Iran is not going to use a nuclear weapon against Israel, certainly not against the United States, because of the retaliation that would occur. And if you're not actually going to use a nuclear weapon, why bother building one? Noam Chomsky is out there saying that Netanyahu's goal isn't survival, because they're not under threat. They're a nuclear-armed nation. They have hydrogen bombs. That's now been confirmed by the U.S. government. Israel wants dominance over the region. They want to smash anybody who would dare say, I think we're going to run our country for our benefit. And that's what's going on. Now, there's an interesting story over at Veterans News Now, Netanyahu's big gamble, because he did. This was a huge gamble. He's offended the White House. He has violated diplomatic protocol by literally forcing himself into the legislative body of a foreign nation. His partner in crime, John Boehner, is technically in violation of the Logan Act, and he should be in prison right about now. But he's taking a gamble that he's going to be able to convince the U.S. Congress to pressure Obama to change the P5+1 deal so the arrangements will fail. And he's taking the risk that the American people are going to look at what happened today and realize the extent to which Washington, D.C. has sold its soul and your children into the servitude of Israel. And that's not going to sit well with them, because the American people don't think of themselves as ruled by puppets. We don't see ourselves as subservient to some master elsewhere on the planet. Netanyahu may have overplayed his hand. We've got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to take a couple of phone calls here, but there's some breaking news. Over at the White House petition site, there was a petition put up to block all mandatory vaccination laws. Over the weekend, it froze. We made a big deal about it. It was unfrozen. It has just crossed the 100,000 signature mark, at which point Obama promises that the issue will be addressed, which could come down to, yes, I'm aware of your concerns, but we've decided you must have all of these vaccinations, and that's the end of the story here. But the petition did pass. All right, let's grab a couple of phone calls here. We're going to go to Cameron in the United Kingdom. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, good afternoon, Michael. Michael, a couple of things. First of all, I think it's a brilliant opportunity for people to actually distinguish the difference between proper independent news sites, such as yourself, and the ones who are put there to somehow brainwash people like AJ. Because AJ is now like one of these people that if you bait people and say, I listen to AJ, they laugh at you. Because of his attitude, because of his
Cameron, I'm kind of uncomfortable turning this into a bash Alex Jones show, because I still owe Alex a debt of gratitude, because back in 2007, he's the one who got me started in talk radio. I know there's an issue there, but I'd really kind of like to maybe move on to another topic, if you don't mind.
Okay, let's move on. Michael, the second thing, you mentioned a few months ago that if the U.S. government realized that Israel has a nuclear arsenal, then by law they can't send them any more aid. They can't send them any more money.
That's right.
So, I mean, they now know that. They've confessed it themselves. The American government saying that, yes, we've helped them develop this. So, I mean, are they going to stop the aid?
No, of course not. Of course they're not going to stop the aid. Of course they're not going to stop the aid. The fact that it's illegal under the Symington Amendment to the Foreign Appropriations Act and the Glenn Act, that's not going to stop them. This is a government that is ignoring the Bill of Rights. If there's something that we need to take away from the declassification of the document that the United States government was helping Israel develop hydrogen bombs, it is to underscore the fact that Barack Obama, on his first press conference as president, basically knew that he was evading Helen Thomas' question. She said, what nations in the Middle East have nuclear weapons? And Obama refused to answer, danced away from it, then had Helen Thomas banned from the White House press corps. The people in the government know Israel is nuclear armed. They know it is technically illegal under U.S. law to be taking your tax money and giving it to Israel, but they're going to go on doing it because Israel sends some of that money back through AIPAC to fund their political careers. It's a gigantic kickback scheme is what's going on here. And these politicians, they need AIPAC's money, they need AIPAC's control over the American corporate media, or they're just not going to have their jobs. This is why everybody who's going to run for office in this country the first thing they do is they fly to Israel and they get their picture taken at the Wailing Wall. And it's humiliating for us, the American people. And I'm hoping Netanyahu's speech is going to have the net effect that Americans are going to wake up and realize that the government in Washington, D.C. is not working for America and the American people. It's working to serve a foreign power. And that's why our economy is in such bad shape, our infrastructure is in bad shape, and why we're always sending young American men and young American women to be killed and crippled in wars that happen to be on Israel's enemies. Because Israel doesn't like to fight their own wars. They actually didn't do all that well the last time they went into Lebanon. They want to send the Americans in to fight their wars for them. That's what the Americans are for. We're not going to risk our precious Israeli children in our own wars. That's ridiculous. That's what the Americans are for.
Very true. Michael, thanks ever so much. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. We're going to let you go here right now. And Netanyahu's speech is costing him some of his strongest supporters in the United States. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi said she was near tears during this speech. And she was saddened by the insult to the intelligence of the United States. And she's absolutely right. Netanyahu got up there with a list of claims we already know have been discredited. And he stood up there and said, "This is what you will believe." And it was insulting. His entire speech, his presence in the Congress, without the invitation of the State Department of the White House, is an insult to all America. And please, make a point. Call your member of Congress, your members of Congress who were in that room. Don't harass the ones who didn't show up. But if your representative, your senators were in that room, you call them up right now and say, "You just lost my vote. Next election." There are no other issues other than the fact that you demonstrably are selling out the United States of America to a foreign power. If enough people start making those calls, we're going to rattle them real, real good. All right, we're going to grab ourselves another phone call here. Melissa in Connecticut. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, thank you so much for taking my call. And I apologize if I'm a little bit off topic, but I'm not sure if I've seen in your on your blog, which I love, John Taylor Gatto, who was an educator here in New York City, and wrote a great book that I came across when I was 15, which spurred me to actually drop out of high school and go to a community college. The book is called Dumbing Us Down, and the Southern Lesson School Teacher. And there's several videos that he's been putting up now on the history of education and the history of public mandatory education, government run. I currently have 2 kids that I homeschool, and thank God I don't have to vaccinate them, and it's working out brilliantly. But I just thought I would put that out there because I think there's a huge revolution happening underground on the homeschool. There's so many people. It's not just the religious people now. It's all across the board. All kinds of people are doing it. And the mothers, we get together. We do, we offer classes like electives, and kids can choose. And we all offer our skills. I teach chess and dance and art, and there's calligraphy, professional calligraphers, there's geometry, there's all kinds of stuff, and we just make our own little school once a week. It's fantastic, and I think it's a revolution for the kids. It's going to be a whole new generation of Americans with way more independent thinking.
Well, we certainly do need that. I mean, public school all goes back to what's called the Prussian model, which was literally set up not for education but to indoctrinate Prussian children so that they grew up subservient to the government and prepared for the military. They basically were cranking them up for the military at a young age, and ever since then all nations have adopted that model, and during times of peace, which is the intervals when everybody's reloading, public education really is about education. But every time the government of any nation makes a decision that they're going to go to war somewhere down the road, the curriculum changes. And it's no longer education, it's indoctrination. And we're seeing all across the United States where they're even talking about dropping science classes because they don't want kids able to think and analyze and solve problems, because that's proven to be the government's undoing on so much of this propaganda. It's not designed to fool a critical thinker, and they don't want critical thinkers coming out of those classrooms anymore. I know there's still a movement to try and demonize and possibly ban homeschooling. They want control of your little kid's mind and your little kid's body, even to the point of Michelle Obama's lunches, which are just horrendous. Prisoners of war get fed better than that. But it's all about trying to get the kids used to just doing as they're told, all these strip searching going on. It's all about conditioning them to just be a certain way that is going to be pliant for the New World Order. And the more the government overreaches in all these areas, vaccines, surveillance, and the rest of it, the larger and larger the proportion of the American people are getting alarmed and angry about what's going on. So there's going to be a crossover point where the majority of Americans are now concerned at what the government is doing, and that's when things are really going to start falling apart. Okay?
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, you got it. We're going to be taking a break here for our news, top of the hour news break. When we come on back, picking up on media reaction to Netanyahu's speech, and it's starting to pop up. I don't know what Netanyahu thought he was going to accomplish, and certainly he's still got control of the U.S. Congress. But there seems to be a growing public and even corporate media backlash against what happened this morning. We'll be right back after the news. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2 here. I got a refill in my coffee cup, and we're good to go. Phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. So we're going to wrap up here on this Netanyahu speech, and the media reaction in the corporate media is very predictable. Sean Hannity is referring to Netanyahu as the new Winston Churchill and referred to Obama as Neville Chamberlain. Very clear bias there. You know, appeasement will not work. And they're still trying to imply that Iran is the new Nazi power. Well, look at who's doing all the invading. Look at who's doing all the concentration camps. Look at who's using torture to extract politically expedient confessions. It's not Iran. And again, the history points to who the troublemakers are. Iran has not initiated a war of aggression against another country in over 200 years. Contrast that with the United States and Israel, which these days can't seem to go 6 months, 6 weeks, without bombing, drone striking, invading, overthrowing somebody else's country. But Sean Hannity is out there saying, yes, we've got to have war with Iran. Okay, Sean, here's your rifle. Here's your parachute. We are starting to see on the Internet a different point of view. Over at Reason.com, story just went up. Netanyahu addressed to Congress, same old argument against Iran negotiations. And going back over the fact that this is all stuff Netanyahu and Israel have been saying for decades without any proof. Now, I was looking over here at the BBC News Facebook page where they put up the quick story, Netanyahu says Iran global threat, and looking at the comments posted under it, nobody's buying this. Just excoriating Netanyahu, saying Netanyahu is a threat to the world, which is pretty accurate. Let's see, Senator Menendez is out there saying he will oppose the Iran deal, any Iran deal that doesn't completely roll back their nuclear program. This is Israel's agenda. They are not going to be happy unless Iran totally dismantles everything they're doing that's connected with nuclear technology, which is going to include that brand new power station that just went online that Russia built. And that is absolutely a non-starter. Everything Iran is doing, they are allowed to do under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which Iran has signed and ratified, and so has the U.S. government. It is the U.S. government, in trying to force Iran to surrender their rights under that treaty, that is in violation of international law, that is not living up to their international obligations. Under Article 4 of the NNPT, the United States is obligated to help Iran build peaceful nuclear facilities. And if they were really worried about a clandestine bomb factory under the power station, like Israel has in Dimona, going in to help pour the foundations and lay the pipes and wiring is a really good way to verify it's just a power station. And don't forget, when Israel bombed the Iraqi nuclear power facility at Osirak, They did so under the excuse there was a clandestine bomb factory underneath. Following the 2003 invasion, international inspectors examined the remains of the reactor at Osirak, and all they found was a power station. So Israel's batting zero in terms of actually identifying clandestine nuclear weapons laboratories other than their own. And that's another reason Congress shouldn't be listening to Netanyahu. But they're paid to listen to him. And once they take the money, they're going to be obedient little drones, minions. Let's see, another article. This is in Raw Story. Best reactions to Israel PM Benjamin Netanyahu's whistle-stop campaign speech in Congress. And one of my favorites that I quoted in the article, Benjamin Netanyahu makes me feel less pro-Israel, and I've always been pretty pro-Israel. This seems to be a reaction that is starting to surface in the independent media and the various online sources. Reaction to Netanyahu's speech divides along partisan lines, and we decided to run our own little poll at whatreallyhappened.com. Did you believe Netanyahu's claims about Iran made before Congress today? And as of the last time I checked at the start of the show, was 3% said yes, we believe what Netanyahu tells us to believe. 97% said no. Total of 5 votes for yes, which I assume are the people who watch this site on behalf of the Israeli government here. Alrighty, so the actual effectiveness of this speech it will surface over the next few days. Yes, Congress is on board with Israel's agenda and perfectly willing to spend as much of your money and the lives of your children as it takes to please their masters in Tel Aviv. The good news is, now Americans understand that's what's been going on for decades. Washington, D.C. does not work for the American people. It does not work for the American nation. It is a puppet regime ruling America for the benefit of a foreign government. And the American people just got their noses rubbed in it, and I hope they get angry. This is a good time to get angry. We always hear about anger management, and anger is bad, and you should stay calm. Nonsense. We evolved to feel rage as a survival mechanism. And now's a good time to let yourself have a good rage. Get your rage on. China has basically issued a warning, diplomatically, to the United States to stop its proxy war against Russia in Ukraine. And basically reiterating the nature and the root cause of the so-called civil war in Ukraine is the West, because a year ago, when the elected, legitimate government of Ukraine wanted to avoid the European Union and get closer to Russia, that's when the overthrow took place. Put in President Chocolate as the head of a junta, and it's been a disaster ever since. Now, down in Iraq, there's been another development. Apparently, the Iraqi army downed another United States helicopter that was taking weapons to ISIS. And people are starting to realize that, yes, ISIS is a manufactured enemy that the U.S. will drop into any country they feel they need to conquer. And it's already having repercussions. As you're probably aware, the government of Iraq has mounted an offensive to recapture Tikrit from ISIS. And I love this little article over here at KTIC Radio. U.S. not providing air support for Iraqi push to retake Tikrit from ISIS. Well, the reason is, and this came out a little while ago, Iraq did not inform the United States of the move on Tikrit. They went ahead and did it. And here's the kicker. Iranian military forces are taking part with Iraq, because Iraq is now starting to understand that the U.S. is playing a duplicitous game, and that ISIS is actually a tool of U.S. foreign policy. It's a whack-a-mole target. Oh, ISIS is in Iraq, we have to invade them a third time. Oh, ISIS is in Libya, we've got to invade them a second time. Oh, ISIS is in Syria, we've got to go in and blow up Syria's refineries and oil pipes and all the rest of that, because ISIS is making money off of that. Anybody who is standing up to U.S. rule around the world is going to be declared to be ISIS, in the hope that the American people, enraged by all these videos and other special effects productions, are going to say, oh, yes, please take my son, take my daughter, fling them into battle against the evil ISIS. And that's what's going on. And now the government of Iraq has figured out that's what's going on. Now, getting on back to Ukraine, they are now unofficially at a 272% rate of inflation. Their currency is collapsing, their economy is collapsing, but that's not stopping the Ukrainian parliament to begin the IMF reform package debate. Here comes the austerity on the Ukrainian people, which was one of the reasons for the coup d'etat. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and that is still one of my all-time favorite pieces written by my lovely wife, Claire, also known as Lady Love. Alrighty, getting on back to economic news around the world. Russia is now looking at ways by which they will be able to soften their food embargo for two of the countries in the European Union, Greece and Hungary. And it's not as easy as it might sound, because Russia is trying to comply with World Trade Organization rules, which would say it has to be all of Europe or none. And Russia's looking at ways where they can help out Greece and Hungary, who are in serious straits over there. Now, on the other side of the story, Russia is now looking at sanctioning French companies over the non-delivery of the Mistral warships, because they bought and paid for them. France was arm-twisted by the United States into not delivering those warships. Russia wants a refund. France doesn't have the money. And on it goes from there. Apparently, Austria, which, as you're already aware, there's a big problem developing in Austria. 7 billion euro shortfall. They're claiming it was an oversight, bookkeeping error, or maybe somebody was trying to hide the true scale of debt, the way Papandreou did down in Greece, and they got caught. But they just had another auction of Austrian bonds, and the 5-year bonds went at negative 0.038%. This is the first negative yield on a bond at an auction ever. That's a red warning sign. Story out of Investment Watch blog. Once considered out of the question, pension plan cuts are now on the table. One governor has just proposed a freeze on his state's pension plan. Everybody's on the verge of default. They're going to strategically default on that segment of the population they are least afraid of, retirees. They won't cause us any trouble. They can't sue us. They can't harm our credit rating. They're going to be dead and gone in a few years anyway, especially if we starve them to death. Now, the reason all these pensions are in trouble is because back in 2008, when Wall Street was putting together this whole mortgage-backed security fraud, Wall Street's pet ratings agencies rated these bundles as AAA. That made it legal for pension funds to invest in them, because by law, pension funds and other retirement plans, because you're dealing with a clientele who are too old to start over and rebuild their lives, they're only allowed to invest in AAA-rated securities. So the pension funds all piled on into the mortgage-backed securities. The whole thing imploded. The ratings agencies got off the hook by telling Congress, well, it's just our opinion. You can't hold us to that. And all the pensions were defunded from the losses. And unfortunately, all of these politicians and bankers and officials who are in charge of these pension plans do not have the gonadal tissue to stand up and say the reason the pensions are now in trouble is because of Wall Street. Because they're still hoping to make the jump to Wall Street or Washington, D.C., and they don't want to upset anybody. Interesting little story. Apparently, Target has announced several thousand jobs will be cut over the next 2 years as part of a $2 billion cost-saving plan. Even Target can't make it in this economy. It's amazing here. Now, here's kind of a cool thing happening. This is over in France. A new French government decree, starting this week, aims to fight planned obsolescence. We talked about this issue many, many times before, the light bulb conspiracy, pyramids of waste. And planned obsolescence is where companies will deliberately design their products to fail quickly, just outside of warranty, so that you will run and buy another one. A good example would be this rush of these LED flashlights. And they're sold on the claim that the LED will last for 20 years and the case is solid aluminum. What they don't tell you is that little plastic battery clip inside, that starts dissolving after a couple of months. And you can't buy a replacement for that one part. So you toss the flashlight and you buy a new one. That's planned obsolescence. If you are still somebody who's using the old Edison-style tungsten light bulbs, you may be surprised to know that modern tungsten light bulbs only burn half as long as Edison's original. There's literally an international cartel of light bulb manufacturers that say 1,000 hours is it. There's even a fine these companies have to pay if they accidentally produce a light bulb that lasts too far over 1,000 hours to just keep it general. Well, France has now come out with a demand that manufacturers state up front how long this product will last before they buy it. And if the estimate turns out to be wrong, there are penalties, including mandated extension of the warranty. I remember when we had our last big screen TV, it literally failed 2 weeks inside the extended warranty. They literally designed them to fail just when it's outside the warranty. They guessed wrong in our case. Oh, gosh, the thing blew up again, and the warranty expired last week. Well, we'll go on down to Target, or Costco, or Sam's, or Walmart, and we'll just buy a new one, which starts to break down when people don't have the money to replace things. Whether it's consumers or computers rather, or smartphones or whatever, people are going to they're going to learn to live without these things. Now here's an interesting story. A lot of people have been wondering why BBC has been kind of treading lightly over this HSBC tax avoidance scandal. And it turns out the chairwoman of the BBC Trust, who works for the BBC 3 days a week, also works for HSBC. And she gets £10,000 per day from HSBC. I think this could be called conflict of interest. The Department of Justice has finally come out with their report on events in Ferguson, and not to anybody's surprise, found demonstrated patterns of police bias, excessive force, and racism in that department. So, will Ferguson's police department reform itself? Probably not, judging by the behavior of police departments already. We got to take another break here for commercials. When we come back, new scandal for Hillary Clinton. Way beyond Lois Lerner on this one. We'll be right back. Oh, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, there's a big scandal brewing regarding Hillary Rodham Clinton and her tenure as Secretary of State. And it all revolves around something called the Federal Records Act, which states, in no uncertain terms, that anybody involved in the business of the United States government has to be using a government email address, which are on servers that are not only secure, but keep copies of everything. This is what got Lois Lerner in trouble, because they had to make those copies go away. Oh, the dog ate my hard drive. The dog ate the backup tapes. The dog ate the company that was doing outside backups. Well, Lois Lerner can relax. She's off the hot seat, because it turns out that during her 4 years at the State Department, Hillary Clinton did not use a government email address. She did all of her business on personal email accounts. And, not surprisingly, did not keep any copies. Now, that's a clear violation of federal law. And it is something that I'm sure Hillary is hoping will go away by the time 2016 rolls around. It won't, if I have anything to say about it. But this basically tells us that a lot was going on in the State Department that the Secretary of State did not want preserved, did not want ever to be made public. This should be a huge scandal. It should result in prosecution. At the very least, it should be the death knell for her ambitions to be the president. Because if it was wrong for Lois Lerner to conceal emails from Congress, it's equally wrong for the Secretary of State to not even save the copies to begin with, mandated under federal law. And there's a new development. As you know, the Clintons have this nonprofit foundation that is just raking the dough in from all over the world. And apparently a lot of this money came in while Hillary was serving as the Secretary of State. And it turns out this is a violation of Article 1, Section 9 of the United States Constitution that forbids any U.S. government official from accepting any money from foreign sources. It's known as the Emoluments Clause. It was actually part of the original 13th Amendment. I'll bet you didn't know we actually had two 13th Amendments to the Constitution. The first one, titles of nobility and emoluments, just sort of kind of went away. But it's still in the Constitution. Article 1, Section 9. And the purpose of this clause is to prevent foreign governments from buying influence in the United States by paying off U.S. government officials. And that is something else we need to make a big deal about, should Hillary run in 2016. Alrighty, let's see. Here's an interesting article. This is over at Blacklisted News. Ministry of Truth. Russia Today faces inquiry by media regulator Ofcom over a complaint about anti-Western views being presented. This is, I think, like their sixth inquiry going on about Russia Today having anti-Western points of view, which, look at American corporate media, has anti-Russian points of view. The First Amendment covers them both. But what's really interesting is they're saying that these inquiries are just, there are viewer complaints. There are viewer complaints from Russia Today's viewers that they don't like what they're seeing. You know, there's an easy fix for that. It's called changing the channel, going to another program. And so I am not buying that ordinary viewers are watching Russia Today, even though they don't like it, and then calling a complaint. This is clearly a form of harassment. Freedom of speech means you get to say what your opinion is. And if people don't like your opinion, they can go to another station, another channel. It's amazing. Now, little update on Gilad Atzmon. He's touring Great Britain right now with his band. They're doing concerts to promote his new record album. And there was a big stink when the town of Nottingham canceled his performance there because of pressure from pro-Israeli groups. And apparently it has happened again in the city of Manchester. The Royal Northern College of Music in Manchester, England, has canceled their performance, Gilad Atzmon's, due to safety reasons, saying the school was unable to guarantee the safety of the band, meaning that somebody called up and said, if you let them play, we're going to come in and trash the place. Israel's supporters do love to play dirty. They think it's their divine right, because after all, they're the chosen ones. They're chosen to behave that way. Now, speaking of behaving that way, the foreign press is still going on about this black site, Homan Square, in Chicago. And they're trying to deflect criticism in the United States by saying, well, this was all authorized by the 2012 National Defense Authorization Act. No, it was not. There's an important point to be made here. The NDAA authorized violations of the Bill of Rights, civil rights, in pursuance of terror suspects. But apparently the Chicago police have been sending ordinary street criminals there to beat confessions out of them, and protesters. 2 white protesters were disappeared into that warehouse back in 2012, and now it's gone public. And the people of Chicago are starting to protest that. And you Chicago voters, as you come up on that runoff with Rahm Emanuel, remember, His Honor the Mayor authorized this, or was complicit with it, did nothing to stop it. So if you're angry and outraged over Guantanamo-like torture prisons inside the United States of America, you know how to vote in this upcoming runoff. Another take on this over at Investment Watch blog. Really? You're surprised we have black sites on U.S. soil? Think NDAA and Israeli-trained police. Because these kinds of off-the-record torture dungeons are, in fact, very commonplace in Israel. Story out of newsforge.com. Michigan Police Department is now admitting they have quotas for traffic tickets. This is the Newaygo County Sheriff saying, yeah, they've got quotas for tickets and arrests. They know it's illegal, but hey, that's what we're paid to do. Up in Fresno, the police are being sued. Apparently, police officers who were investigating a possible illegal gambling operation made off with valuable coins worth $100,000. Some city, I think it was in Texas, fired their police department. Crime went down 61%. Starting to wonder how many of these criminals are wearing those blue uniforms with those shiny buttons and badges and tasers and guns and all the rest of that here. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials. We will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I've made the observation on a few occasions that as our society becomes more and more obsessed with those pieces of paper and colored ink, that our better aspects, our better characteristics seem to fade away. We get into this attitude of anything that gets money is okay, and that starts to spread into anything I feel like doing is okay. And apparently there was a story out of 12160 where an Ohio school board president has pled guilty to child porn charges, and he's had to resign. And apparently there was even a 5-hour standoff with police over the situation, which I understand. He's in serious trouble there. It's a shame he wasn't working for the federal government, because over at Breitbart they've got this story here where government can't fire employees who spend 6 hours a day watching porn. And Breitbart is quoting from a recent CBS News report that government employee unions, civil service rules, actually make it almost impossible to fire any employees. And CBS reported on one federal government employee who had 7,000 pornographic files on his office computer that you, the taxpayer, paid for. And he was observed spending 6 hours a day, being paid out of your tax money, watching porn at work. But he still got his job, and he's still being paid because the appeals process to fire somebody goes on for years. We can't even fire the low-level employees for misbehaving. No wonder we can't get the top politicians out here. We did a flashback story here where 5,200 Pentagon employees back in 2011 were tracked purchasing child pornography. I don't get this. I don't get this. I don't have a problem with grown-up porn, but we're seeing all these people inside government and the military who seem to get their jollies from little children. Are they all seriously mentally ill? We know that politics attracts the sociopathic personality. There's something really wrong with the wiring, whether it's the Jimmy Savile, BBC, the Westminster pedophile scandal, the Franklin scandal. Seems to be a consistent theme going on, and along with the clergy molestation. There's something seriously disturbed about these people, I think. You know, little children are for making silly faces at, and things like that. Science toys. Because, you know, growing up and losing your innocence, that's a one-way street. You don't get to say, I'm sorry, you know, I abused you. You can turn around and go back to being an innocent small child again. It doesn't work that way. It's really weird. I got an email the other day from somebody saying, well, really, you shouldn't be exposing this sort of thing. Actually, I think we should. Because anybody who's diddling the little kiddies inside government is wide open to blackmail by a foreign power. And the way that you negate that security threat is you put their private vices on full public display. So that when a foreign government comes in and says, betray your nation or we'll tell everybody that you are having sexual relations with common household appliances, the target can turn around and say, they already know. No big deal. Go away. Leave me alone. Now, here's a very alarming story. This is being reported in the Daily Mail. Facebook has apparently deleted the account of a 12-year-old middle school student for suspicious activity because he made a video criticizing President Obama. And apparently it was simply echoing and supporting Rudy Giuliani's comments that Obama doesn't love America. And apparently, activists are saying Facebook is now taking the role of suppressing criticism of the American president. That's not what Facebook is supposed to be for. Facebook obviously has decided the First Amendment does not apply to them. Now, here's a very interesting story. This is out of the Washington Post, no less. Freak flaw undermines security for Apple and Google users. And what they're talking about is back in the 1980s, early 1990s, there was a ban on strong encryption developed in the U.S. being exported to other countries. And the ban was lifted in the 1990s, but by then the damage had been done because the deliberately weakened encryption was hardwired into all the devices and nobody felt like changing it anymore. And everybody put the weak encryption in there in order to sell their products across the borders to other countries. What they called it export grade encryption. And it turns out researchers have discovered that it is very easy to force browsers to switch back to the old export grade encryption. And then you can crack it very easily. So once again, we see this mania about NSA control of encryption actually making us less safe and secure online. Weak encryption, backdoors, all of that is not improving the security of America's computer infrastructure. It is actually harmful to it. The NSA's bans on strong encryption and hardware backdoors and all the rest of that are actually a clear and present danger to the security of the American people. Because cyber criminals will find these backdoors. They know they're there. And they'll exploit them. And they'll make money. They'll take money away from you. The losses to cyber crime are in the billions and billions of dollars every single year. But NSA can't be bothered to go after the cyber criminals. Maybe they are the cyber criminals. They've got all the tools to do it. You, the American taxpayer, have built an arsenal of hacking tools for the U.S. government, second to none in the world. They get bored. We'll go over, we'll loot a bank or something. I need to make another payment on my BMW or something like that. And looking at all this behavior, I can understand why Ed Snowden got fed up and disgusted with what was going on. And by the way, if you have not seen it, the documentary about Edward Snowden's contact with Glenn Greenwald and others to blow the whistle on the NSA is currently running on HBO. I think it's on HBO On Demand. It is worth looking at. It does tell the story about the personal side of it, but they do go in and they talk about what's been going on with the United States government building a system to spy on everybody on the planet. They're not spying on the cyber criminals. They're not able to find the terrorists. They're watching you to make sure you're not thinking those double plus ungood thoughts. And along the way to steal your business secrets. And they have been caught doing that. The biggest threat to your computer security is not ISIS, Iran, China, or Russia. It's the National Security Agency, who seem to be taking the opinion that all of our computer equipment is their personal playground. And that is a violation of the Fifth Amendment and the 10th Amendment. And the 9th, now that I think about it. Along with the very obvious violation of the 4th Amendment. So the NSA is a rogue agency. They are not complying with the law. And they can say the FISA court says this is all legal. No, it doesn't, because the United States Supreme Court ruled in Marbury versus Madison, laws repugnant to the Constitution are automatically null and void. And the FISA court's jurisdiction is only outside the United States of America. All right. We got to take another break here for the news. When we come on back, phone lines are still open. You can call in with your comments about what's been going on with Netanyahu. We're going to be talking about human-caused global warming. Yes, it's still with us. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show for hour number 3 here. The phone lines are open. 877-300-7645. 877-300-7645. And I want to step back to some issues we were talking about earlier. We are seeing more and more reactions come out from Netanyahu's speech. And I'm looking at this one article over in Cyberdurden called Vichy America. And it probably should have been more accurately titled Vichy DC. Because that's exactly what America just learned today. We have an occupational government serving a foreign power. They refer to Jean-Philippe Pétain Boehner. And it's absolutely right. Boehner's not serving the American nation and its people when he bypasses the White House and the State Department to invite Netanyahu. Boehner's in violation of the Logan Act. Why is he not being arrested at this point? Well, because laws are only for you little people. You know, the plebes, the laws are for you. We're above the law because we're rich and we're powerful and we're politicians and we serve Israel, and that exempts us from the laws of man. Over at 21st Century Wire, there's a follow-up on this story about Russia Today being investigated by Ofcom for anti-Western comments, and it turns out it was a single complaint that came in. And they're saying, you know, Russia Today, they're in breach of impartiality standards. We're all in favor of impartiality. Okay. Was the corporate media impartial when they claimed Saddam had nuclear weapons and would not allow anybody on the air who doubted that claim? Is the corporate media being impartial when they will give Al Gore and his carbonazis huge amounts of airtime to push the hoax of human-caused global warming and will deny any opposing voices and interview time? Don't start waving impartiality around regarding Russia Today until you clean your own house out. And the fact that you are not impartial there in the corporate media is why I'm doing what I'm doing right now, instead of what I'd rather be doing, which is film and animation and helping my wife with her music. I mean, the hypocrisy is stunning. We've got the American corporate media today going on and on about evil Iran and nuclear Iran and all the rest of that. I'm not seeing any impartiality in terms of... They're not even reporting on the story about how Mossad's own memos say that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon. They haven't reported on that declassified U.S. document that confirms Israel has nuclear weapons. The U.S. helped develop them. They are up to and including hydrogen bombs. Where's the impartiality there? It doesn't exist. How dare a corporate media that is unashamedly biased in favor of the U.S. corporate government political agenda scream that Russia today has to be investigated because they have an anti-Western view. Well, pretty much the whole world right now has an anti-Western view, and it's the West's own fault. Stepping on back to this issue about codes and encryption here, this is an almost laughable story coming out of Patriot Rising. Obama is complaining to China because China has demanded encryption backdoors to make sure they're not being spied on, even as the Obama administration is demanding exactly the same thing. Obama's attitude is, we're allowed to have encryption backdoors, but you're not. You're China. You're the bad people. And the administration is still going on about how China is the big cybersecurity threat, Iran is the cybersecurity threat, Russia is the cybersecurity threat. No, the big cybersecurity threat to us all is the National Security Agency. That's the threat. Now, here's a bizarre story. When I was a kid growing up in New England farming country, whatever we'd grow for our own consumption, if there was something left over, we'd put a little stand out by the road. Sell the surplus. It wasn't going to keep. No big deal. We still have farmers markets here on the island of Oahu where we can get locally grown, non-GMO, I think still, produce. But now, apparently, those poor people over at the supermarket chains are getting very, very upset over farmers selling food directly to customers. And the USDA and the FDA are out there saying, you shouldn't buy your food directly from farmers. You have no idea how good a farmer they are or not. The food may not be safe. You need to go to that supermarket and buy that packaged, canned, chemically laden GMO full of aspartame and monosodium glutamate stuff because we have declared that is what's safe for you. And we know it isn't. There's a lot of stuff in commercially produced food that's very harmful. I react badly to MSG. I react badly to high fructose corn syrup. And apparently there are now laws being considered in Maine, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and California banning farmers from selling their food directly to consumers. Fines, even prison sentences. Use a corn on the cob, go to jail. It's the law. It's all about protecting corporate profits. It's all about protecting these middlemen who set themselves up and say, we'll buy the food from the farmers and we'll repackage it and we'll resell it to you at a markup. And they want their profit protected by making it mandatory. By saying, you will buy your food from the supermarket. You will not dare grow your own or buy it from a farmer. And we're seeing more and more places around the country where growing food on your own property is being declared illegal. It's a zoning violation. What a different world it is from the one I spent my childhood in, where everybody was growing everything. All of it's their land. They can do whatever they want on it. No, they can't grow marijuana. They can grow corn and wheat, make moonshine, but they're in the backwoods. And now we've reached a world where the government presumes to dictate where we will get our food, what medicines we must take. Big stink about that one coming up. We are living in a dictatorship where all of our options and choices are taken away from us. The only choice we're allowed is the pretense of choosing which corporate lackey, which servant of Israel gets elected to office. That's it. We've lost our freedom to say no. And if you can't say no, yes doesn't really mean much of anything, does it? There is no freedom without the freedom to say no. No, I don't want to be forced to go to a supermarket. No, I don't want to be forced to put my data on the cloud. No, I don't want to pay taxes for the money to go to Israel and Wall Street. And no, you may not have my child for a war of conquest to make the bankers richer than they already are. We need to recover our freedom and our right to say no. That's a big part of what that First Amendment is all about. And, I might add, that Second Amendment, to reserve to the American people the right to say no when the government overreach crosses that line. Thomas Jefferson wrote the reason for the Second Amendment was to reserve to the people the right to oppose oppressive government. That's why oppressive governments always hate the guns. Oh, we're going to ban the AR-15 ammo. We're going to do this. We're going to infringe what cannot be infringed because we're scared that you're getting upset with us. And yes, we are. Going to take a break for commercials. Back with human-caused global warming. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before we take this next phone call and get into global warming, interesting little story. Earlier today, somebody sent me a link to WJACTV.com because halfway down, a little more than halfway on the right-hand side, they had their own poll. Do you support the U.S. government taking a role in protecting Israel from a nuclear war by Iran? And when I first looked at it, yes was leading. So I posted this link at whatreallyhappened.com along with the observation that everybody who votes yes ought to be handed a rifle and dropped into the war zone. If they are in favor of war, let's see the true measure of their courage and commitment. If you want war, you will go fight it. You will not send the children of Americans who do not want wars to fight your wars for you. Well, I just took another look at the page, and no is now leading at 81%. So it looked like they tried to bias the poll one way, and the response is now overwhelmingly no. We do not support the U.S. government taking a role in protecting Israel from a nuclear war by Iran because Iran does not have nuclear weapons. They are not building nuclear weapons. Israel's been screaming this since the 1980s. It hasn't happened. Even the Mossad confirms they're not doing anything leading to the construction of a nuclear weapon. And how dare Netanyahu get up there and lie to us like that? And we now know because of that leaked Mossad memo that he was lying to us when he had his cute little cartoon bomb. He was lying. He knew he was lying. Couldn't wipe the smirk off of his face. And how dare the United States Congress sit there and give him standing ovations as he lies to the world. All right. We're going to grab ourselves a phone call here. Bob in, I think it's Mississippi. Michigan. Michigan. Sorry about that. How you doing, Bob?
Good, Michigan, yes. I'd like to use NASCAR, not NASA, NASCAR to debunk global warming. Back in the late 40s when NASCAR started, the Daytona was first race, second race was Richmond, Virginia, late February. It worked out great during the 50s, 60s, early 70s, and all of a sudden they started getting snowed out. And finally, they moved it to Atlanta, Georgia, because it just got too cold to run. And but early on, weather was fine. Now, last week at Atlanta, it snowed for that race. So I guess they're going to have to move it to Cuba or somewhere because it's you know.
That's why Obama is normalizing relations with Cuba. We need a new NASCAR track.
Correct, exactly. And one more quick thing. The average temperature here in Michigan for the last week or so has been 35 to 40 above. We hit that almost every week. My problem was it was 35 to 40 below wind chill. That's 80 degrees temperature difference from normal. So thanks a lot. We'll talk to you later.
You got it. Yeah, and actually here on Oahu, and we can't complain about winter because of our warm weather, but it's actually it's gotten cooler the last couple of days, and the wind is up, so we got wind chill issues as well. So thank you very much, Bob. We're going to let you go here, and we're going to talk about human-caused global warming. Story out of the National Post. The cold and snow of February were record-breaking. Is March going to offer a respite? Spoiler, no. And the Weather Network is saying the frigid conditions are going to continue for a little while longer. 49 out of 50 states have started March with snow still on the ground. Hawaii's one of them. Down on the Big Island, down on the top of Haleakala on Maui, still have snow there. Pennsylvania is currently under a winter weather advisory. And story out of Freep.com, Great Lakes ice cover over 88% more than last year. And they're relating the story of the freighter Arthur M. Anderson, which is stuck in the ice. They're trying to get back to their winter layover port in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin, and they're having to get rescued by icebreakers. And the Arthur M. Anderson is historically significant because this was the last ship to receive a communication from the Edmund Fitzgerald. Remember Gordon Lightfoot's song about the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, so forth and so on. Huntington Beach, California. Hailstorm turned it white. Winter storm knocked out power to more than 400,000 over 3 days. Frigid February closes coldest since 1979 in Washington, D.C. Amazing stuff here. Over in Baltimore, the city has started closing restaurants because their water pipes are frozen, and the local health code says they have to have hot and cold running water to be offering a food service. And so they've closed 5 food service businesses because the water isn't running anymore. Now, I have family in New England. I have family still living in the town I grew up in, and they've been sending me pictures of all the snow and ice. And I went back into my personal image archive, looking at pictures of winters when I was a little kid, and I'm not imagining it. It was never that bad when I was a kid in New Hampshire. I lived in middle New Hampshire for about 6 years. Other parts of New England for the other part of the time here. It was never as bad. I mean, snow up to the top of the stop signs. I mean, that's how bad it is. Alrighty, now then, let's talk about vaccinations, because just like the laws are being changed to force you to buy your food only from supermarkets, they're talking about laws for mandatory vaccination and tracking. Apparently, Texas is looking at no less than 9 new laws that will mandate certain vaccines, and you will be required to register with a vaccine tracking database to make sure that you are fully in compliance. Now, here's where it gets interesting, and it becomes very, very obvious that this is all about making money for the large pharmaceutical corporations. There's a story out of VaccineLiberationArmy.com where apparently the Health and Human Services is accepting comments on what is called the Draft National Adult Immunization Plan. If this law is passed, it will mandate all adults of all ages to go back and get those 40-some-odd mandatory childhood vaccines, which is ridiculous because if you're my age, I've already had measles. I don't need a measles vaccine. I don't need a mumps vaccine. I had that too. But they're basically going to say, by law, you must go get these 40 vaccines, and we will track and make sure that you buy them and stick them in your arm, and you give your money to the vaccine companies. That's another sign that we live in a dictatorship. More about vaccines when we come back. Join us on the air. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and I'm looking at an email that just came in asking if compulsory vaccination laws would be considered repugnant to the Constitution, and I replied, yeah, it's a violation of the 9th Amendment, which basically limits the government to those authorities specifically enumerated in the Constitution. And, of course, this government's been in violation of the 9th Amendment more times than I can shake a stick at. But this country was set up to give limited power and authority to the government and reserve everything else to the states and the people. And obviously, if you're going to have any right at all, it's the right to decide what goes in your body. and not be used as a pincushion for the profitability of corporations just because they write very generous campaign donations. Now, a story out of healthimpactnews.com. Gardasil vaccine. Spain joins growing list of countries to file criminal complaints. Apparently, the manufacturers of Gardasil are being criminally charged by numerous countries. France, India, Japan, and now Spain. A bunch of others as well. Unfortunately, of course, here in the United States of America, we're not allowed to sue the vaccine makers no matter how much damage they cause. They're protected from civil criminal prosecution. Remember, the Homeland Security Act that created the Department of Homeland Security, who are breathing a sigh of relief because the funding bill got passed with no strings attached. The Homeland Security Act included a rider that indemnifies vaccine makers from civil lawsuits, from the damage caused by their products, under the theory that in the event of a biological terror attack, the vaccine makers would have to fast-track solutions and we shouldn't hold them to account. Well, you know, there's really an easy way to do that, and simply say, in the event of a biological terror attack, the vaccine makers are exempt from civil litigation, but that's not what the rider said. It exempted them across the board, even during times when there isn't a biological act of terror going on. We've been seeing this as a growing trend in the United States when computers were brand new. Home computers. IBM PC, Commodore 64, the Amiga. I loved the Amiga. The computer companies like Apple and Microsoft and IBM lobbied for limits on product liability because it was a new, brand new, fragile, growing industry and they needed to be protected. And Congress said yes. Unfortunately, those laws are still there. And that's why every time you get a computer or a piece of software, there's that end-user license agreement, which basically says we're not even going to promise that this is going to do what we say it's going to do. And if you use it and suffer harm, you can't sue us. We are not to blame. And so computer makers and software vendors don't have an incentive to sell products that are quality. A good example is this Autodesk 3D Studio Max that I have still been unable to install on my machine. I've quit trying. I'm using an alternate product to do what I'm doing here, but it's just very rankling. And now they're doing the same thing with the vaccine makers. And we know what these corporate people are going to do. They're going to sell whatever makes money, and they're protected from the consequences of selling a bad product. What's going to happen? We get more bad products. And it's one thing when it's a computer in your office that's a faulty product, and quite another when the chemicals pumped into your body are defective, contaminated, tainted. We're going to take a phone call here. Brad in Ohio. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, aloha. It is just so evil what they're doing to make me take a product I don't want. Car insurance is one thing. Making me take their medical care is another. And it really pisses me off. Really?
Well, you know, I would even argue about the one about car insurance, and obviously that's something we should all have. But before it became mandatory, the car insurance companies had to be competitive. They had to have low premiums and good service, and they had to be attractive to the consumer. And as soon as car insurance was made mandatory, what happened? The premiums went right through the roof, and the quality of service went down. The benefits evaporated. We saw exactly the same thing under Obamacare. Premiums went up, deductibles went up. It's all about taking more money from the American people and giving it to corporations, and that is fascism.
It is. It's fascism, and I don't want it. I take vitamins. I do my own, regiment of doing things. I don't think I have to have that. I don't want it. I don't want them to force something on me when I'm employed only 6 months out of the year. Really, it's scary.
Well, the issue is that so many of these vaccines, especially administered in combination, are harming a lot of people. And now from the point of view of the corporations, it's only killing a few people. You guys are being so picky. So this little kid had his life wrecked. That's only one, and really, the modern medical establishment in this country is operating on the same moral level as the traveling Wild West medicine show, and I probably ought to make a video on that very theme.
Oh, yeah, Al Gore.
Well, the same thing, something scary is coming, and I will sell you a solution. And again, it's another example of how this banker-driven lust for pieces of paper with colored ink on it has destroyed what was best in the American character. We're not the great people that the rest of the world used to look up to and admire. Only a few decades ago, we're seen as just greedy, money-grubbing, immoral, unethical, anything for a buck kind of mindset. And we were made that way by the private central banks.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, why are we being forced on something? We shouldn't be forced on something.
Because it makes money. It makes money. Yeah.
You can give them $10,000 something, and you don't have to pay the car insurance.
Yeah, you can opt out if you have a bonded trust account with the cash in it, which hardly anybody does. But but the idea is they're forcing you to use chemicals of questionable safety. And now the vaccine makers are saying the reason this year's flu shot didn't work, it's all our fault because we let the flu vaccine get too warm, which is what happens when it gets injected into your body. But that's their latest excuse.
Oh, with the Amerisol or whatever, the mercury.
Yeah, that's still in there. In fact, somebody actually sent me a package of information, including another product insert from a vaccine, and it's a horror story to read that. You don't see that on TV. It's not reported in the corporate media. The actual package insert, which they're putting in there so they can say, hey, we tried to warn you. It's your own fault. You got wrecked. This stuff isn't actually known to work. Could be dangerous, but go ahead and take it anyway because now the government's going to tell you.
I see that in all the commercials. With all these medications, they put it on there, and then they have ambulance chasers afterwards, and they come after them and going, look, we proved that this will do this to you.
Yeah, it is. It's such a joke, and it amazes me how many Americans don't look at those two commercials back to back and realize something is seriously wrong, where these pharmaceutical companies are allowed to market products that are harmful, and their only recourse is, well, we got to get a lawyer who will wind up with most of the settlement, I might add. It's all driven by money and greed. Brad, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Last segment of our program today. And we're wrapping up with this whole vaccine situation. And we did a flashback story. This is over at Natural News, where, according to The Australian, emails leaked from Merck Pharmaceuticals from 1999 showed company executives complaining about doctors who disliked using Vioxx, which has since come under severe criticism. And one of the emails said, this is a Merck corporate executive, quote, we may need to seek them out and destroy them where they live, end quote. That doesn't sound like a scientist to me. It doesn't sound like a doctor. It sounds like the mafia. We're going to seek them out and we're going to destroy them where they live. They're standing up to us. They won't let us make money. What kind of a mindset is that, especially given that Vioxx did not turn out to be the blessing? They just put it out there, make money, and anybody who stands up to them has to be neutralized. They're saying bad things about our product. They can't do that. What if the bad things are true? That doesn't matter. We're making money. All righty, we're still looking at the reaction to Netanyahu's visit to the United States of America. Fox News is still going on about it. Interestingly enough, over at Al Jazeera, they're running an article apparently after Netanyahu addressed AIPAC yesterday. And AIPAC, people were coming out to the street. They were greeted by protests. The big surprise, the shock, was how many American Jews were in that crowd of protesters. saying, no, Bibi Netanyahu does not speak for me. We do not favor war with Iran. We do not think Iran is a threat. And apparently, the people of AIPAC were, up until that moment, oblivious to the fact that the attitude of American Jews toward Israel is changing dramatically. Because they're coming to understand that Israel is not a bastion for the safety and security of Jews the world over. It is the actions and provocations of the government of Israel that represent the greatest threat to the safety of Jews, precisely because Israel likes to cloak itself in the mantle of we represent all the world's Jewish people, so that when there is a backlash to the actions of Israel's government, they can say, oh, it's anti-Semitism, it's Jew hatred, because inevitably Jews are being targeted. And Jews are now realizing that, yeah, it's Israel that's causing all this strife. Israel is not working for the safety and security of the world's Jewish people. They're offering them up as a living sacrifice for political reasons. Oh, good, they killed another Jewish person. We can scream anti-Semite again. So, big shock with that one. And let's see, we got that one. Another over at the Answer Coalition. Another report saying that the response to Netanyahu's speeches is showing that American public opinion about Israel is changing irreversibly. People are waking up and realizing the extent to which we've been lied to by our government, by the government of Israel, and people are sick and tired of being lied to. And Netanyahu probably did it to himself because, again, his speech before Congress this morning was just a rehash of the same lies they've been telling going back to the 1980s. And we know they're lies. Even the Mossad admits they're lies. So I don't know what Netanyahu is going to do now to get his war fought on Iran by Americans. He might just go ahead and bomb Iran's nuclear facilities himself. And then when Iran counterattacks, he'll retreat back to Israel and say, oh, Americans, you got to come protect us. Iran is trying to attack us. It's an existential threat. They're the villains for attacking us just because we blew up their power station and exposed their population to cancer-causing radiation. They're being picky again. You must come save us. Or Netanyahu could even take one of Israel's clandestine nuclear weapons and set it off someplace and say, see, Iran is a nuclear nation. They've had bombs all along. They're attacking you. I think we're now up to a total of 54 different governments around the world acknowledging that, yes, they have used false flag terror attacks to change public opinion, to manufacture consent. And there's a high risk right now because Netanyahu is panicking. Israel's government is panicking. They're losing their control over their most loyal population of slaves. Washington, D.C. The war hawks are in a panic. None of the propaganda is working. The bankers are in a panic. The private central bankers are in a panic because we figured out what this scam is that they have been playing on the human race for 300 years that has made them insanely rich and the rest of us debt slaves. The great political awakening is upon us. The people of the world are starting to realize the true nature of their society. All governments throughout history, especially tyrannies, try and create an illusion for the people as to what their government and their nation is all about, that they can feel good about. Oh, I'm proud to be Roman. I'm proud to be Soviet. I'm proud to be a Nazi. I'm proud of whatever. When the illusion falls, things change, like the collapse of the Soviet Union. We're getting close to that here. And that's why they're trying to find some way to take away the guns, some way to shut down the independent media, They're absolutely convinced that they can just make this troublesome independent media, this internet thing, the tubes, if we can make the tubes go away, immediately the United States will be transported back to the 1950s when the public believed everything they were told by the corporate media on behalf of the United States government. And it's a very naive belief, because the American people are now aware they cannot and should not trust anything the government and the corporate media is saying. And that's not going to change if the independent media is somehow silenced, because the people want the truth. They have an instinct for needing to know what's really going on in their world, especially when you're looking at the possibility of your children being sent off to fight another war. And they'll go wherever they need to go to find the truth. Shortwave radio, packet radio, fax machines, like the Samizdat did. Anyway, we're coming up here to the end of the show, and I want to reiterate that you should go find out if your representative and your state senators were in that Congress this morning with Netanyahu banging their hands together and screaming and cheering, knowing they're being lied to, knowing that you are being lied to. And you should contact them. Call their office. They don't read email. Call their office and say, just to let you know, you just lost my vote next election. There will be no other issues that will change my mind. You just lost my vote. Because no government can serve two masters. And the government that serves Israel does not, cannot, and will not serve the American people. A friend of Israel is no friend of America. Congress just demonstrated that to us all this morning. And in these dark times, America needs leaders who will put America first, second, and third. And that's the way it should be. It's the way it was supposed to be. It's the way this nation was set up. We the people are the top priority. For the government, for the states, for everything. It's about we the people. We're the boss. It's our country. And we are not for sale to a foreign government. Our children are not for sale as mercenaries to that former government. So now's the time for you to get angry and make those phone calls and talk to everybody and just say what a humiliation it was to see our Congress just fawn over this foreign leader as he lies to us to start a war. There's the music. I got to get out of here and get some animation work done. We'll be back tomorrow, Wednesday, here on the Genesis Communication Network. Until then, stay safe, stay informed, stay skeptical, stay angry. Make good choices. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.